All right, everybody, we are back, and we have a very special guest with us, Derek Yu. We are going to be talking about the last 10 years of HD and just all of what that entails. And I also have Cloyce and JJG joining me to talk with Derek.
Hello, hello.
Hello.
Oop. Hi, everyone. I had to turn down the volume on my stream that I'm watching over here.
Oh, you're watching a stream while you're being interviewed?
I'm watching this stream.
Just making sure.
Yeah, I mean, just to start off, I'd love to just get some insight on how you feel about all the different things you've seen today. I imagine there's a lot of new things you've never experienced even after all these 10 years in this stream.
Yeah, no, it's wild. I mean, I think one of the things I'm so impressed by is just the variety of stuff, right? Like, the challenges, but also the mod, and it was great seeing the World 23 happen live, because I'd obviously seen the video that was posted, I guess, when it was first, executed. But to see it done live and explained at the same time by Kirby was really sweet. So, yeah, I mean, this is a 10-year-old game, too, so it's really cool.
I mean, it's just awesome that there's still so much community surrounding this game, I think, that we've been able to put something this big together. I've been really happy with it.
Yeah, definitely. No, it's been a trip for me, too, because, yeah, I haven't seen Spelunky 1 played so much, in a big event like this in a long time. So yeah, it's been really fun for me, and I love being in chat and doing some trolling too.
Yeah, I noticed that.
Maybe a little bit.
Just a little.
I mean, we all know that Twitch chat exists specifically. It was invented for the purpose of bullying Xanagir, specifically. That's the whole point of Twitch chatting.
I know. Xanagir, if I'm ever being too hard on you, just let me know. But
not hard enough.
I feel like you kind of deserve it sometimes.
I mean, he's out here being pretty mean to Hectic and all those people on his live stream. So I don't know. I think he gets what's coming to him.
Yeah, and just being a downer about score runs and stuff. I gotta defend score runs and poke back. So
I mean, you didn't even think people would chase the scores as high as they did. I mean,
no, not at all.
I do want to talk about that a little bit. There's those two limits that were originally set in the game as considered that this run is definitely cheated, which were 3 million and 1 minute and 30 seconds for score and speed respectively. Just wondering, so if you think about those times, one of them was spot on. 137 is the current NE% world record. So you really had a good prediction on that one, I would say.
Yeah. I think we ran through simulations in our heads, basically. What's the fastest that anyone could possibly beat a level in Spelunky? And then, we kind of added it up, and then we probably padded that a bit just to be on the conservative side. And I think that's how we came up with stuff like 130. Yeah. And I'm sure we did something similar with score too.
I mean, I have major doubts that when you said we're going to make 130 the limit for cheating, that you expected anyone would ever beat the game in 1 minute and 37 seconds.
No.
I mean, it's really incredible what people have done.
Definitely not. But, as a developer, I think you learn pretty quickly you cannot, or that it's very easy, I should say, to underestimate what players can do with your game. Especially with glitches and things like that, where you can't foresee that kind of thing, right?
Yeah, and I was going to say, because what's interesting is that the new limit is 9 million, if I remember correctly, which the highest ever score gotten with glitches is 8.7 million. So somehow landed once again on a really accurate number for just how high things can go by some sheer stroke of luck. But yeah, right. I do want to. I've always kind of wanted to ask about this a little bit. Did you know at all about? Because there was a fairly small community of Spelunky Classic speedrunning, that existed kind of in 2010, 2011. I was wondering if you knew anything about that, or if you knew how much people were going to try to speedrun the game when you were kind of making the remake into Spelunky HD, and then same for HD and 2.
Oh, Spelunky Classic? Yeah, I'm not really that familiar with the Spelunky Classic speedrunning community at all, actually. So I think, it'd mostly be news to me. By the way, Andy says hi. I'm texting with him right now. I asked him if he wanted to maybe jump on. He's giving his kids
we
a
have a whole lot of
Hi,
we have a long list of complaints for him.
If you have any questions specifically for him right now, I can text the questions to him.
Our kind of whole board of questions that we've got to look at is not super focused on the technical side, I would say. We're kind of focusing on
anyone
community,
comes up with anything,
lots of community history and like game development type stuff. Because I know that's kind of your whole jam.
Right. Yeah. So I don't know. Regarding Spelunky Classic, does everyone pretty much use Discord to talk about that game?
So there's kind of two answers to that. So there was I don't know how familiar you are. There's a very old website called Speed Demos Archive, which was used back in like the 2000s to deal with to where people would communicate about speedruns. And we kind of dug up these old forums of people saying like, hey, I beat the game in 4 minutes. I beat the game in 3 minutes. And so there's a runner who I want to shout out real quick called Exploding Cabbage, who held the world record of 2 minutes and 53 seconds for 10 or 11 years. This was all before Discord even existed. And unfortunately, we don't have a lot of contact with any of those old runners, but recently, around like 2018, 2020, there's been kind of a resurgence of that type of thing, of people kind of getting bored of HD and saying, hey, let's try some Classic. And recently, the kind of more modern Classic community has developed alongside the HD community and Spelunky 2 communities, and those are in Discord. But so I was kind of asking about that old school Speed Demos Archive underground community. I mean, wasn't super well known, so I guess you didn't know about it at all, right?
Well, I did know about Exploding Cabbage because I read their they posted their run of Spelunky Classic on SDA, and I read their whole.
So you know a little bit about it.
I do, yeah. Actually, I've said this I think in interviews before, but when I released Spelunky Classic, I just thought that it would be pretty much a dead game as far as speed running went, just because of the randomness. I didn't have a great understanding about speed running back then, but it seemed to me like a game with so much randomness just wouldn't be appreciated by the speedrunning community.
I mean, I think back in 2008, that was probably true, if I'm being honest.
Okay.
I would say that
was the general feeling
speedrunning really coming into its own.
Right.
It's actually
kind
interesting.
of happened almost as a result of Spelunky.
Yeah, I would say the whole kind of premise around how Moss ranking works is because of how Spelunky is designed, right? We have all these different random situations, and this whole kind of idea around pivoting between different runs, starting off as a low percent run, and if you get a good shot, switch to any percent or no TP, any percent or hell run, etc., just based on what's thrown at you randomly. And because of that aspect of it, we kind of came up with these aggregate leaderboards where you could be ranked over many different types of runs. So it's actually pretty interesting because it's built a pretty unique kind of speedrunning community.
Gotcha, yeah. I mean, I'm trying to think about other randomized games from way back when, I don't know, Toe Jam and Earl, did it have a speedrunning community when Spelunky Classic came out and stuff like that?
I'm sure there were some examples of that.
Yeah. But Exploding Cabbage that write-up really, it changed the way I saw it and kind of opened my... I mean, I just thought it was really cool because I never expected that anybody would really speedrun Spelunky seriously. So, reading about their strats and what they did to deal with the randomness in the game was very awesome for me to read back then. And
if anyone wants to take a look at that, sorry.
Oh yeah, cool.
I did post it in chat if anyone wants to take a look at that.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember just kind of like going through this description like very methodically to try to understand what they were doing. And just thinking it was super neat.
Yeah, so I'm wondering, like, after you read that, did that kind of inspire anything or give you anything that led to the way that HD was designed, or were you pretty much just kind of not expecting any serious speedrunners for this game as much?
I think it definitely put speedrunning in our heads when we were working on the game. Although, I think first and foremost, we still are just kind of designing the game for regular play. But I think once speedrunning's in your head, it's just kind of always there in the back of your mind when you're designing stuff. Trying to think like whether there are like specific things that we included just for speedrunning.
I mean, obviously, like, once you get around to Spelunky 2, there's a lot more of that, right? Like, looking at the data management menu and all that good stuff that you
Yeah,
guys
I
and
mean,
Blit
for
kind of
sure,
did for
just
us.
like adding tools like that. So with Spelunky 2, it was like that was the case where we took, we actually asked the speedrunning community for specific things that they wanted to see in the sequel that would improve their experience. In Spelunky 1, I'd say it was just kind of in the back of our minds as we were working on the game. And I think Exploding Cabbage is, their submission, their write-up really had a lot to do with us even, thinking that it could be a thing in Spelunky 1.
Yeah, I was wondering, like, Burnt Jam has just talked in the chat about the telepack, kind of adding that item, because obviously one of the big things with the teleporter in Spelunky HD is that you're not able to use it as well on hell runs because you have to carry the scepter and go through the Moai and all that good stuff. And then Spelunky 2 just busts all that wide open and says, hey, you can teleport and carry an item, and that just makes so many things possible. And I
Yeah,
was
for
wondering,
sure.
just in general, like when you're thinking about the design of items like the teleporter and the Matic, and even kind of the way the jetpack and Vlad's cape are kind of opposite of each other in Spelunky 2, like how much does speedrunning go into like how you're designing, like looking at how are people going to use these items casually, like the teleporter to get into weird areas or mess around, versus kind of going through those levels so fast as a speedrun?
Right. I mean, these days I would say that in general, as far as my overall like game design philosophy goes, like I want to put a lot of things in the game that people can play with, but it's so hard to really see. I would say it's impossible for a developer to really like see the end of the possibilities for a particular item or a particular system in the game, right? And so it's interesting because I think back in the day when games were designed, you could really like, I don't know, you could design a game feeling like you knew more or less what people are going to do with it. And I think as we move forward, I think games are going to be designed more and more where the developers themselves just don't even really know like what the actual possibilities are for their game, and you kind of release your game feeling that way, which is interesting. So for like an item like the telepack, I had some of the thoughts that you're talking about where it's like, oh well, the teleporter was such a big deal in Spelunky 1 for speedrunning that it'd be cool to give people a telepack so that they can then free up their hands. But beyond that, I wouldn't say that I really thought about it too deeply, because it's just at that point like I'm getting into this whole can of worms that I could spend way too much time thinking about myself, right? And there's like a whole game there to make. But I think knowing that people enjoyed Spelunky 1 so much, it really frees me to be a little looser in my game design, but also be like more ambitious, feel like I can add things to the game that I don't fully understand myself. And I think in general, I think you're just going to have to see games get made more and more like that, because those end up being like, I think, some of the most popular games. Like that's what people want from a game. Now that we have the power to do that, right? They want to. I mean, if you just look at all the cool and crazy things that everybody has done with Spelunky 1 today on the stream, it's impossible for a developer to really plan any of that. So I don't know. I think for some game designers, it might feel a little uncomfortable, like releasing a game with that feeling, like I don't know what's gonna happen with this, but I've come to kind of embrace it just because I see all the beautiful things that come out of that kind of design.
Is there anything that kind of stands out top of mind that just like was completely different from how you expected it, like how the community embraced it?
Completely different. I mean, I think always like those those wild glitches. Like I still don't. I turned away for 1 second, and I missed seeing exactly how Hectique ended up inside the Moai head with the eggplant, and there's always stuff like that. I would say though that I'm pretty like ready to be surprised when I release a game like Spelunky these days too. So I'm in some ways it's like I'm bringing out my bucket of popcorn. I'm ready for the show to begin, right? When a game comes out. And so yeah, I'm like in that mindset to be surprised. So off the top of my head, I can't think of anything where it's like, wow, that is just completely like turn the game upside down for me, because the game's designed to be like that,
The great thing about that attitude is there are no glitches. It's all features, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean,
no,
could
that's
you
basically the
imagine?
mindset. Like if you find, like, we're designing a world basically, and if you find a glitch in the world, it's a feature of the world. You found some way to kind of make the rules work in this certain way, but the rules are the rules.
I mean, yeah, could you imagine, like, if back in the day some developer was like, oh, the ball and chain breaks the Moai, that's not supposed to happen, I'm going to patch it out. I mean, completely different and much less interesting history of this game if that had happened.
Yeah. And, I mean, we started doing that, like, with Eternal Daughter, which is a very, very old game of mine that I made with my friend John Perry, who I'm working on UFO 50 with, actually, but that was like the biggest game we'd made together up until UFO 50, and we started working on that in high school. But actually, I think it was either one of our friends or maybe it was like the very early players of the game, like right after we released the game, found some bug where you give a character an item and then that character shoots up off the top of the screen to let you pass. They're like blocking the entrance to a cave or something like that, and they go shooting up, and basically if you give them the item and then jump on top of their head, you can ride them like off the screen and out of bounds, and then you can move around up there. And instead of patching that out, we just added more walls like off screen so that you couldn't accidentally like fall off the side of the screen, but you could still use it to kind of glitch your way into a part of the game that you wouldn't be able to get to at that point normally. So, I've been embracing that kind of thing, I think very early on, because I've always loved that kind of thing myself in games. And, I posted this in chat, but finding out that there was essentially like a minus world equivalent in Spelunky 1 is really just like one of the coolest things for me, because finding out about minus world in Super Mario Brothers when I was a kid was just mind-blowing, and it just made Super Mario Brothers like feel so much bigger than it actually was, right? It's like all those things that you kind of imagine are going on off screen like, whoa, they actually exist. So I love that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really interesting to talk about that design in the context of. So first of all, obviously, Spelunky HD. I mean, the reason we still play it is because of that kind of design. Like, there's so much you can do in this game that we've shown off today, and so much we haven't shown off today. That just like kind of emergent gameplay is the kind of buzzword there, where it's like you just kind of create these systems that allow things to happen that you could never foresee. So one thing that I thought was really interesting about that is when you look at Spelunky 2 and the design in particular of the Lake of Fire and the Tiamat lasers, like the ascent of that, and kind of saying, kind of wink, wink, nudge, nudge. It's not possible to get past here, right? Like to kind of talk about like how you evolved your design from HD, where the chain of items that you have to do is kind of more rigid, versus in Spelunky 2, where everything is kind of more open and kind of
definitely
allows for these crazy possibilities. Like, I'm sure you never knew bubble skip would be a thing, but you knew something like it would be possible, or that we would find something cool to do with that.
Yeah, exactly. I think you can see in the evolution of the series the change in my understanding and my mentality about it. And right, just kind of like designing the game to be more and more open, for sure. That is very much on purpose. And yeah, I think you totally hit it on the nose. When designing that, all those traps and lasers leading up the top of Tiamat's room, I was totally expecting people to get through that. I didn't know how exactly, but I was pretty sure that it would get figured out somehow.
I mean, yeah, and that's such a great kind of mentality to have, where you're like basically posing a challenge, like with that, and then also with like making the cosmic ocean kind of be such a daunting task. Like looking at kind of what Spelunky HD runners have been doing for, I guess it would have been 8-9 years at that point, and then saying like, okay, but what about this? What are you going to do with this? And kind of giving them that playground, that sandbox, so to speak. I've always found that really admirable about the way you've designed the Spelunky games, kind of giving people a room to kind of do a lot of different things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, to me, it feels like kind of opening up the design to have a kind of cooperation with the player that you can't really have in other mediums, right? So like, I think in other art forms, like pretty much every other art form other than video games, you can't get that same kind of partnership with the player in like creating the artwork almost. And so to me, it's like really, really making the most of the medium of video games to design it like that. But I like in Spelunky that there is still a fairly rigid like structure, in that you go level to level. There's a beginning, there's an end. You can win. So in that sense, it's very much like just a classic arcade game. Because I think that allows players to have something that they can focus on, and when they're starting out, and then as they're doing that, they kind of realize like, oh, okay, I can do this and this, and there's actually a lot of freedom and creativity in how I play. But I think it supports a lot of different play styles, and I think it also makes it more fun when you kind of do break out of that structure. Like there's a difference between Spelunky 2 and just like a sandbox game, right? Where you're just kind of placed there and you just have all of these things to play with. But there's no real goal other than what you come up with yourself. So, for me, like, I just really enjoy games that have kind of an interplay between these two design styles, I suppose.
I'm curious what your thoughts are around some of the like crazier challenge runs we've seen the community doing. Like the Eggplant book kind of ends around the eggplant run itself, right? But we've had so many different insane runs since then. And I'm curious if you keep up with any of those or if you're familiar with some of those and what kind of crazy runs you expect us to maybe see in the future.
I kind of come across these days. I sort of just, when something kind of passes through my feeds, I'll notice. What would you say is like the most nutty run now? Because no one has done like a blindfolded run yet, right?
I don't know.
That's the big one. Yeah, that's like pretty much impossible. But I would say the most, obviously, we saw some pacifist low percent hell earlier. I mean,
that's pretty wild.
That was pretty wild. I don't know how much you saw about that Olmec.
Today is pretty wild. What about, the thing that I was curious about actually is whether there are co-op challenge runs that are popular.
Not so much in HD because there's the local co-op aspect of it.
Right.
We have been talking more about on the
Spelunky
Spelunky 2 side. Actually, there's a big one. Cloyce has been doing some of these runs. Is the low percent Cosmic Ocean, which is
low percent Cosmic Ocean. Whoa! So has anyone done that?
So the furthest we've gotten in single player is 726 by DT, and in multiplayer, there are a few runs. I think someone got to the 730s once. I mean, I got to shout out some people like Landy in chat right now, who is one of the biggest pioneers of that category. Oh, yeah, we do have a seeded low percent Cosmic Ocean. Thanks for mentioning that, Hectic.
Seeded low percent Cosmic
So, like,
Ocean.
when you can kind of plan things out, it's like this gigantic 114 level puzzle, and that's been done. And it only took about 50 minutes in the actual run.
Yeah. No, I think it's really cool the way that you've all used the seeded run system to play the game in a different way also. I mean, I remember with Spelunky Classic, which did have a level editor, that people would make their own Metroidvanias and things like that with it, which I thought was really cool.
Yeah, we've actually seen some resurgence of that recently, believe it or not. I got to shout out. First of all, I'm sorry I didn't say Camiro is the person who completed the seeded low percent 799, so I thought I would shout that out.
Okay,
nice. And then Gorge Grouse is someone in the Spelunky Classic community who has recently been making some really exciting like Kaizo levels and things like that within Spelunky, which is really cool. And then on the Spelunky 2 end of things, we've got some mods that kind of introduce a level editor back into the game and kind of like going back around, like Spelunky 2 is the sequel to Classic. And so we've seen,
I remember
like, in
with Classic, people were even making like auto running levels, where basically you're getting tossed around by Yetis and things like that, and you don't even control it, and it kind of like takes you to the end. I don't know what it's called, but I see a bunch of those in Mario Maker.
I love I don't think I've seen one of
those.
I've never seen one of those in Spelunky. That's really cool to hear that people were using the level editor way back when to do stuff like that.
Yeah, I'm actually curious to see one of those now.
I remember there was one that extensively used Yetis to just toss Spelunky guy around the level, and eventually, to like an end state. But it was really neat.
On the HD side, one of the more impressive challenge runs I've seen recently is Max No Percent. I don't know if you're familiar with like all the jargon we use, but Max is
No Percent.
Yeah, Max
it's
is
funny. It's starting to sound like that meme that's like, what is it? It's like none pizza with left beef. Have you seen that meme before?
When are incredible challenge runners going to complete none pizza with left beef percent? And
there's the challenge
percent?
I'd like to put out for everybody is the none pizza with left beef percent.
So Max is when you go through the worm and the mothership, and then No Percent is like low percent, except you can use 0 bombs, 0 ropes, and you can't take any damage. And Carly Braun,
and also no gold.
Oh, also no gold, right? Yeah. So it's very difficult to get the seed that will allow you to even complete such a run, and then to execute on it at the same time is pretty impressive.
So is there a list of seeds anywhere that, like, does anyone compile kind of like a list of seeds and what they're good for and stuff like that?
Not really on the HD side. I had actually started compiling a list of seeds on the Spelunky 2 side, but the patches kept changing the level gen, so I kind of stopped for a while, and I might pick it up once the patches slow down. Not that we want them to, but
there has been some development of some very interesting tools.
Yeah.
Like people have been like peeking into the code of Spelunky 2 and have figured out how to tell like how big each cosmic ocean level is, basically. And so they found like some crazy ones that are like have super small levels for speed runs or super big ones for score runs. And okay, I gotta give another shout out here. I want to get the time right on this. I think Vindo Viper has a seeded Cosmic Ocean run that is, I want to say 20, 21, 22 minutes long.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah.
He basically like did all this himself of like routing out, here's how I'm going to teleport through each of these levels. It's really, really impressive. Like he put a lot of effort into it. So yeah. Seeded, I would say, in general, is less popular because obviously that whole randomness of Spelunky is what's so appealing about it usually. But every so often people dip their toes into that seeded space, and there's so much cool stuff you can do there as well. It's 21 minutes. I just looked it up.
And JJG is actually one of our more impressive challenge runners as well. We have a lot of them, but JJG is one of a very small number of people who has killed Yama with every item from the chain. So the Ankh, the Hedget, the Book of the Dead, etc. So I don't know if you want to talk about that a little bit, JJG.
That was a challenge I set myself last year, which was really fun. On Moss Ranking, there's the Ujat Run category, which was done some years ago. But that category looked really difficult. I wanted to complete that, but it looked too difficult. So instead I thought, well, I'll work my way up and kill Yama with items that are easier to do, and then finished with Uja, and that was cool. The Chris knife is an interesting one, because when you give the HH the Chris knife, he kind of repeatedly puts it down and picks it back up really fast. I don't know if that was seen in the science segment earlier, but that's a strange interaction.
That is strange. So it's only with that item, huh?
Yes, I think that's the only one. You just get the sound of him picking it up and putting it down super fast over and over. I don't know what he's trying to do with it, but
Yeah, Spencer just called out concussion as a real Moss Ranking achievement.
Oh yeah, so we have achievements on Moss Ranking that kind of categorize different like sets of categories people have completed, and the way that you finish those categories is you like have the physical item and you whip it onto Yama's head, which is very funny when you're doing it with something like the scepter, because it's like, wow, I have this powerful weapon that I could use to just immediately destroy Yama if I wanted to. And instead, I'm going to do this esoteric setup and whip the scepter onto his head to deal the final blow to him. It's like, wow, that is certainly something. But so Yama gets a lot of concussions in some of our most difficult challenge runs.
That's great. Yeah. I mean, yeah. So who came up with something like that? You know, like one thing I love is just the history of these things. I still don't fully understand that, like the World 23 exactly like how it came about. I kind of, from my understanding, you know, with that kind of thing, like several people are involved in it. It's like knowledge that's built on top of previous knowledge, right? To sort of get to solve a problem like that. And I know that Kirby did a lot of work herself in actually like putting it all together. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I would say in general, like if you look at the catalog of all these crazy weird things we've done in this game, like even talking about like the most recent discovery, it was like, okay, well, Spencer, not the most recent, I guess there's been another one since then. But the second most recent discovery of that, like crawling in midair to get the eggplant into the Moai shenanigan, which unfortunately we didn't see today, but trust me, it's a shenanigan. But that was discovered by like Spencer kind of just pointing out, oh, apparently you can get midair crawling by whipping off of a ledge or whatever. And then I said, oh, and then I pinged Hectic and said, hey, Hectic, didn't you want midair crawling for this one strategy we were trying to work on a couple of weeks ago? And he said, oh, yeah, and then went and tested it, and then it's like all this combination of different people to make everything work. And I think for all the little pieces to make the Kirby warp work, there's probably at least 6 or 7, maybe 8 people that were somehow involved in discovering something or testing something. Like there's a reason we call it science. It's a real scientific process, basically, of building upon standing on the shoulders of giants, so to speak.
Yeah, and it's really interesting too because there's multiple generations of all different aspects of the community, so speedrunning and science and whatnot. So like I've been doing a lot more science on the HD side, but I get to reuse so much that's been discovered from like Sashaval and Sar from the tools they built, like Frozlunky and like Lunkybox, and people making these tools open source and sharing them and collaborating and just kind of constantly building on top of what's come before until we just get more and more understanding. Though I will throw this out here because I know a lot of people want to know. There's always been this rumor floating around that one day HD might be open sourced, similar to Classic, and I would be interested in a definitive kind of word from the devs.
Oh yeah, I'm definitely open to it, and I'm pretty sure that Andy would be also. I think, I think it's just a matter of when, and it's just something that I think we would just have to get together and discuss, and probably discuss with you all about what would be like the best way to do that. But I'm all for that. I'm all for that at some point. But I would definitely want to make sure that the people who were most involved in writing the code, which would be Andy in this case, were cool with that.
I just think about what kind of amazing things the community could do without the reversing part if they just had the source part, and then we could just build so many amazing kind of experiences on top of that.
One thing that's been so interesting to me. Oh, sorry, did you want to say something?
Oh no, go ahead. Sorry.
All right, so was kind of comparing, like, when we look and we delve into this source code and we're looking at all these weird jumbled guesses of what the compiler thinks is going on behind the scenes, like we find like, oh, there was a debug menu, and I think you've talked about this before about how like dev tooling, and I was wondering, like, kind of from the perspective of a developer, how that tooling and then like looking at what the community does, like pretty much from scratch, coming up with similar ideas and talking about like, so the dev tooling exists within the game, like in HD, and then you talked about like I think how you did more of that in Spelunky 2 because it was so helpful, and then comparing that to the type of tools that we have for the community that the community has kind of worked so tirelessly to create.
Yeah, in Spelunky 1, I basically had to stop Andy from writing tools because I felt like it would just become. I felt like we were going to go down a bit of a rabbit hole writing tools, and there gets to be a point where, like, you're spending more time writing the tools to make the game than make the game. And it's difficult, too, because when you're working on a game, there's a point where it just always feels like you are 6 months from release. And then, you're that way for years, right? Like you're 6 months from release for multiple years. And so it always felt like no, let's just hard code this, right? Like I was still, even with Spelunky 1 on Xbox, like I was still just like putting levels like directly into the game's code. It was not externalized at all. And I feel sorry. I feel sorry for Andy now. We probably could have used like a few more tools, and I know he would have enjoyed writing them. But ultimately, I think it did work out, right? And then so with Spelunky 2, where we had a little more control over how long we could spend on the game, and we had the benefit of working off of the existing Spelunky 1 code, at least as a blueprint. I don't know how much of Spelunky 1's code actually made it into Spelunky 2 in the end. I'm guessing probably not that much, because just to get the game working with online, you have to write that code with online in mind from the very beginning. But just being able to reference the code, I think, was very useful for Mickey and the rest of Blit that worked on the game. And since we had a bigger team, I was like, yeah, let's have some tools. Let's still be sensible about it. sometimes I see like indie games where it's just like they've got the craziest tools for the game, even though the game is like relatively small. And it's just one of those things where I know that programmers love writing tools, right? And so
I feel called out.
And so I feel like you have to temper that a little bit. It's like every part of the development team has certain like rabbit holes that if they're allowed to just do whatever they want, they will just go into that rabbit hole and never come out. And so everybody's got to kind of keep everybody else in check a little bit and be like, hey, I know you're having fun with this, but like we need to make sure that we're kind of staying on track and moving the game forward. And so, yeah, it's a balance, but in general, like compared to Spelunky 1, like Spelunky 2 had incredible tools. Probably still compared to a lot of games, I think Spelunky 2's tools are probably still like relatively simple. Like I was still making levels in text files. Like there's no real like in-game level editor for Spelunky 2. You could like go into a test room and create stuff to see how it interacted, and just like test out certain situations. And yeah, we had things like there's a replay feature in the debug tools in Spelunky 2, and there are ways to test. There are basically a lot more ways to test specific situations in Spelunky 2, whereas in Spelunky 1, I would just like reset. Probably a lot like a speedrunner trying to get like this one situation to appear in the game. So yeah, I mean, compared to the modding tools, I would guess that the modding tools, and I haven't like looked at them super closely myself, but my guess is they probably go harder in a lot of ways than the tools that we had even for Spelunky 2. That would be my guess.
I mean, yeah, you talked about a level editor. I mean, we have that. Like, we have I've talked about that. I talked about a little bit earlier that people have been making Kaiser levels, in particular John GC, who is a player in the Spelunky 2 community, has made a lot of these awesome Kaiser levels that, like, I saw, like, Grand Pooh Bear playing and things like that. And, yeah,
right,
we have
so those
a
are
level
all
editor.
made
like,
in-game, huh?
That's all done via a level editor that Spelunky 2 modders, I mean, absolutely unbelievable community. I got to give a shout out to the Spelunky 2 modding community. Like, just the amount of stuff that they've done in such a short time with this game is unbelievable to me.
Yeah, that's really cool, right? And I'm sure like Andy would have loved to have stuff like that in Spelunky 1. I think he would have loved to just write tools like that. Part of me feels like I think he just really wanted to write those tools. Like, I don't know, it's maybe half and half, like actually making the tools useful for our development, and the other half is just him like really enjoying writing those tools. And I could see that too. Like, I could see how it would be fun. Like, I'm enough of a programmer to understand how enjoyable it is to do stuff like that. That's partly why I wrote a level editor for Spelunky Classic, right? Is just, I think it's cool to give people direct tools to be creative and like remix the game. So yeah. It's super fun to see people making mods and stuff like that, and things like Frozelunky and stuff. I definitely approve.
Yeah, like you said, the people making tools in the community, we don't have a game to ship, so the tools are the main project. And for you, it's more of a means to an end, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah. For us, the release date is like always on our mind. Even when, you don't have to like release a game at a certain time, you just like, with Spelunky 1, I think there was more pressure to release. We were working with Microsoft, and it felt like there was kind of this window, right? But even though we didn't have that with Spelunky 2, it still felt like there's pressure. I think as time goes on, you you start to get this kind of like internal voice telling you like, we should probably start working toward release. And then of course, once you put out like the first trailer and people know about the game, then it's kind of like constantly people asking like, when's the game coming out? When's the game coming out? And yeah, you got to do it. And so you need to find that balance between writing the tools and getting the game out. Like you want just enough tools that you can get the game out on time, basically.
Yeah, makes sense.
So I'm one question I had was just like, what do you all feel like is next as far as Spelunky and Spelunky 2 goes? And Spelunky Classic also. Like, what are kind of the main projects, and maybe even just more generally, like, where do you want to see the community go with things? And also, where could like we as the developers help with things like that?
Yeah, I mean, Hectique mentioned the Crystal Monkey. We want Crystal Monkeys in all 3 games. But
back, patch Spelunky Classic, just to add the Crystal Monkey and nothing else. Keep all the other garbage in that game. My favorite bad video game of all time.
I love Spelunky Classic.
Happens every time there's a stream and I come on and I'm like, okay, yeah, we'll do the Crystal Monkey, and then honestly, Hectique, like I forget.
Well, I mean, we're just gonna keep reminding you.
So,
but yeah, I mean, it's hard to say. Like we've been building a ton of new tools on the HD side. Like I actually want to try to get HD to a similar kind of modding API that we have on Spelunky 2 next, and get level editors and like modding integration with our sites. Classic is another interesting one, but in general, I think we're seeing more and more interest in like triathlons across all 3 games. And I'd actually like to get to a point where we have the modding in place to where we could do Tunnel Man Triathlon by adding the Tunnel Man character to HD and 2.
Oh, nice.
Because like Tunnel Man Low% is so fun.
The triathlons are great, and I will say that is something I never thought about at all, is that people would do triathlons of all 3 games. Like that was never even like a figment of my imagination. So that was quite a fun surprise when the community started doing that. Like I never imagined that.
I mean, I never imagined there would be 6 people willing to do a hard triathlon in an event setting. Like the popularity of those runs really has exploded a lot recently. And to talk a little bit more about the future of the community, I would say that the big thing right now is events. Like we're seeing like all the work it took to set up this event, but it's like now we have all these overlays and kind of the teams in place that we know who is kind of a reliable person that will, I mean, all the people who have helped run this event, like TNF, Gare, JJG, I'm going to miss someone if I just list them all, Sonth, Bumper Oyster, Xanagear, have been really, really incredible. And I think the big thing for the community in the next coming year is going to be to bring back more of those events and kind of make them more frequent and more streamlined.
Yeah,
that's great. I'd love to see that. Yeah.
It's kind of feeling like the community's like transitioning through a generational kind of divide where like there was a lot of people who were around for a long time, and there's still a lot of those people, but there's also a lot of new people, and we're kind of building this next generation of who are the people who are going to be around for a long time in Spelunky. But a lot of those people weren't doing events, and so we're kind of rebuilding that muscle. And I think when Spelunky 2 came out, we didn't have as many events as we probably wanted to, and I'd love to see us just as a community get more events for Spelunky 2, HD, Classic, just events in general for like Moss Ranking to host all of these different activities for the community.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. And I'm really happy that online multiplayer has enabled some of that. Just being able to, like I said this before, but the doing like the online arena tournaments was totally like a dream that Andy and I had when we added Deathmatch to Spelunky 1, because we played Deathmatch a ton ourselves, like I went over and stayed with Andy for a while, and every night we'd play Arena together and just really enjoy it. And so, yeah, even though that online multiplayer, like, it's definitely been like a tough thing to add and get working, and to add crossplay to all these different platforms has been really tricky. But it's felt really worth it just to see what it's enabled in the community and during these events. And yeah, I'd love to support the events that you all put together in the future, in any way that I can, because they're really well done, and I'm always just so happily surprised by what everyone comes up with as far as yeah, like the different, just the variety of things that I saw today, like I mentioned before, is so cool. And I think that's an interesting thing about Spelunky that kind of gets missed a lot when it is talked about in the press, for example, or just on social media in general, is just like the variety of ways that you can play the game. And so I'm really happy that these streams can show that off, because I think a lot of focus is put on Spelunky being like this incredibly difficult single player game, and really there are like a lot of ways you can kind of get into it that are not as difficult, right? Like with online and things like that, and even Arena, I think, is treated as like a much more breezy and casual way to play. So yeah, it sounds really cool, and I'll definitely be keeping in touch kind of to see what you all need as far as support from us developers.
I know that Arena, or not just Arena, but online multiplayer has kind of really made such a vibrant casual. Like there's, like you take the chaos of Spelunky and you add 4 people playing all at once, and like the way that everything interacts with each other, like everybody dies at once, so like all the bodies fleeing into each, like it's just absolutely insane. Like, wow.
Yeah, I think it's the best way to see that kind of crazy interaction, all the crazy interactions that go on in Spelunky, which is really, to me, it's like the beating heart of traditional roguelikes that I wanted to bring over, that I think has still not like filtered out into gaming, like mainstream gaming at large, as much as I would have hoped. So just, the fact that everything can interact with everything else and in these fun ways. You do see it a lot, I think, in like physics simulation sandbox type games, but it's something that I feel like every game benefits from, at least a little bit, because it allows you to be so creative, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot, like even talking, like like online, like multiplayer for casuals is amazing, but the kind of open doors that happen with multiplayer in the context of strategies, like there's this strategy in the game in Spelunky 2 where you can basically blow up the tile under you as you're going through a door and trick the game into, like, how when you're in a door, like you can't interact with anything, and make it so you can't interact with the tiles and just no clip through the entire level. And obviously you can't leave unless there's someone else in multiplayer like there to leave the level for you because you're not interacting. So there's like all this crazy stuff that only works in multiplayer, and like teleporting outside the level and having someone leave for you, and all this weird stuff. And also like triple crown, where you clone all of the different crowns in the game and give them to everybody.
Oh yeah.
That's always a good time.
See, that's exactly the type of thing that I hope that people would do with the clone gun, is that type of thing.
Yeah. And then just talking about, like, in terms of like feedback and things like that, like seeing like over time, like, oh wow, all these multiplayer people are going to Cosmic Ocean, we didn't expect that, and then adding those coffins was a really, really nice benefit change to allow people to do that. And then like so I wanted to mention something. Oh yeah, like for the Arena, like taking the feedback based on the Arena event to kind of streamline it for future, like adding presets and things like that is really, really kind of going to make those events happen in the future.
Right. Yeah, I think that's the next thing that I want to work on after we get crossplay out for PlayStation, is those arena features. I think Xandagear gave me a list of things that would really make it easier to do events for arena, and I would love to support that. But I haven't brought it to Blit yet because they're working really hard on getting crossplay out, and so yeah, I don't want to overwhelm them. But that is totally something, as far as just the game itself goes, where I would like to support that. Because yeah, I was really excited about there being more arena streams and events in the future.
And yeah, obviously, if we're talking about arena, I've got to give a shout out to Fink, who has been kind of the chief organizer of arena events within the community and done a lot of really good stuff with that and help with the feedback and things like that.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks so much, Fink.
Given a lot of shout outs today, but there's way too many amazing people in this community to list them all, really.
Yeah, I know. I'm always worried I'm going to leave somebody out, because yeah, there are so many great people that are just making it all happen. There's a lot going on. There's really a lot going on, and it is hard for me to keep track. So I really appreciate these streams for kind of like, giving me like a showcase of the whole community and letting me participate in a really like fun way.
Yeah, it was super fun to just have you in chat, kind of participating throughout the whole day. I know the interview's really fun, but just having you in chat and just participating throughout all the segments was so much fun.
Yeah, I loved it. It's yeah, I don't know. I really love the fact that there are like Spelunky emotes that I could use on Twitch and stuff. If I'm ever late replying to somebody, it's probably because I'm like hunting through all my emotes to find the perfect one to use. So, yeah, thanks for including those Spelunky emotes. I love them.
No problem.
Are you aware of the Derek-themed Discord reactions we have in the Discord server?
No, I'm not. Should I be scared?
Not really, but
I think you've seen Derek Approves. I think Spelunky 99 had a giant Derek Approves.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I think I have seen some of them actually.
Isn't Derek Approves
right now?
I enjoy them quite a bit.
Yeah,
Isn't Derek Approves the same picture that's used on the Derek Likes It Steam list of games or whatever?
Gotcha.
I think it might be that same picture.
Whenever someone posts a clip of some horrible thing that's happened to them in Spelunky, it's posting Derek Approves, or Direct, or You Lose.
Gotcha, yeah. Oh, I'm honored.
Great.
I'm really honored. Yeah, that's so great. I love it.
Yeah, I wouldn't say.
Yeah, I
any...
appreciate all the drawings of me during the what's that
Gardic
what's that
phone.
app called? Gardic, yeah.
Yeah.
I was wondering though. The thing I was wondering as I was watching those drawings was like, if I didn't have long hair, how would people draw me to let everyone know that it's supposed to be me?
Yeah, thankfully you do, because I am not a very good artist.
And you have those demonic red eyes in real life too, right?
Oh, right. That's what it would be. Yeah, just.
And they light up
Plus
every
got the red
time someone gets blocked off by a tiki trap in Spelunky HD.
They do, so they're just kind of permanently red. I'm like Cyclops from the X-Men. Actually, I've got to wear these special goggles, or else I'm just kind of like just shooting laser beams everywhere from all the people that are getting stuck in Spelunky.
Since you brought that up, Cloyce, that's something I have to ask. So, with the tiki traps in Spelunky HD, often you can go through a run and one will block your way in such a way that you have to use a rope or a bomb to get past it. And I was just wondering, Derek, when you were like testing the game, playing the game, was that something that you came across, and did you ever think that was something funny you wanted to keep in, or something that you might wanted to change but didn't have time to, or things like that, I guess?
Yeah, I think it was one of those things where a lot of times with game design decisions that you have to make, it's like a number of things, and you always have to weigh like how important is this to change versus how much time, do we want to spend like making that change. And I kind of came to the general conclusion that with traps and level formations, well, mostly it's like kind of the things like traps that get added to the levels at the end, or sometimes those create like a sometimes those block off the path, or sometimes it makes it so that you need a rope, otherwise you're going to fall too far, right? Like there's no safe way to drop off, that kind of thing. Like that happened a lot more in Spelunky 2, it seemed like. But I kind of came to the general feeling that one, it's more difficult, I think, to sort of like get rid of all of those types of blockages.
Yeah, I guess
you kind of have
never
to chase them
everything
down like one at a time, and then keep like adding fixes. And I get a little nervous about making those kinds of changes like after release, like too many of them. And I think the other thing I sort of felt was that like I didn't necessarily want the path from the beginning of the game to the end to be necessarily like completely clear. I think just adding like a little bit of I guess chaos to the path itself, where I don't know, I guess part of me just felt like maybe it was too clean to just make it so that the path could be like completed entirely without bombs and rope. It seemed like it might be cool to make it so that players have to have like a backup bomb or rope, that they have to kind of keep that in mind a little bit. I think that said, when like some egregious cases came up, like if it was happening too much, we would try to like mitigate that a little bit.
Yeah.
But I guess I just didn't like that feeling of having to kind of like chase down every single one of those trap placements, or if there was like, if it felt like it was more like an edge case.
I mean, come on, we put them all in a list for you in Spelunky 2.
Yeah.
They did make a list.
Yeah.
Yeah, probably also didn't anticipate the no percent runners.
Right. That's the thing. Yeah, it's like sometimes with like a very specific type of run, right? Like it's really important that even an edge case gets changed, And so it's something to consider, because, it's like it makes total sense, and I don't want people to get like overly frustrated with stuff like that. But at the same time, I'm always kind of having to balance also just getting a little too like nitpicky about stuff like that, I think, from a design point of view, because you can end up just chasing those kinds of things forever. Like as you might have gathered, I think, from this interview, like I'm very conscious about going too far down certain rabbit holes. Like I use that term a lot. And I think that's because I approach game making and game design from more of like a visual arts standpoint, where it's a little less rigid, I think, in some ways. And also, from the perspective of like creating a world that feels natural enough, that feels like it's something that you can live in and isn't just like designed to be played to. So it's a difficult balancing act, and I'm always considering like a lot of different types of players. And I do obviously care a lot about these like very specific niche runs, because I think they're super interesting. And so, when I can accommodate them, I would like to. But yeah, as always, it's kind of like you got to think about it from a lot of different angles all at once. And I would say overall, I like to feel like I have kind of like a looser hand over all of this stuff.
Yeah, that's something I'll try to keep in mind more when I am doing a speedrun or challenge run and then come across a tiki trap and get blocked off and think, Derek approves.
Very nice.
Or you didn't quite finish the entire black market in under 21 seconds, so the dark
Oh,
level
yeah. Well,
came coming back.
I noticed someone in chat that's reminded me to ask you, Derek. I mean, I know that Spelunky HD is 10 years old now, but it's still not too late to patch out dark levels. I'm just putting that across.
What a patch that would be, right? Like 10 years later, just completely patching them out.
You just look at the patch notes, and it's just like a completely empty page, and it just says remove dark levels, like they removed Herobrine.
No explanation.
Just nothing else.
Yeah, I don't know if you were watching the temple shortcut races earlier, but the dark level timer actually persists across runs. So when you're restarting after your fight with Olmec, you can get a dark level on 4-1.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, you can just load into the game and immediately be met with a dark level, which is really funny.
Oh my gosh. Yep. Yeah, I don't think I saw that specific case happen, but I could totally believe it. Yeah, Eric has a similar view on the quirks of games and wanting to kind of preserve them. And so, I think for us, there's kind of like a time limit after the release where it can start to feel kind of bad to make changes to the game, even if it's like an improvement to the game, right? Like you're kind of maybe removing like a personality trait of it, Like
so changes like laser hugging in Spelunky 2.
What is laser hugging?
That's when you go up to a laser trap and kind of fall past it, and for some reason when you're right next to it, it doesn't hit you. But it was patched out like about a year ago.
Oh, that got... Yeah. Are you talking about like bringing that back?
Not seriously. It's just something I wanted to talk about because I thought it was funny.
Quirk?
It was a pretty common strategy.
It was pretty funny, and I think a lot of people liked it. But I mean, we're not missing it too bad.
And it's been a while now that it's been gone. I think we've adapted.
I mean, I will say that I think, like, working with Blit, I think it was something that Eric and I, like our philosophy about this thing, I think, we had to kind of like discuss it with them, right? Because they're the programmers. And so for them, like something like that, it seems like it's not working and they want to fix it, right? Like that's kind of how they feel about it. And so I think
seems
Eric
like
and
Chad is disagreeing with me, by the way. Just wanted to butt in and say a lot of people want laser hugging, apparently.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. People have different views on this stuff too. It's difficult. There's no right answer to a lot of this stuff also. And so I think it also just becomes easier in a lot of ways, like after a certain amount of time has passed, to just kind of leave it in, because by patching it out you end up just creating more controversy over it, when I think it's easier to just sort of accept like this is what the game is like, but Blit, I think, definitely just because they were also just like a bigger team, whereas like Andy, by the end of Spelunky 1, by the time we released, like him being pretty much the sole programmer on the game, like he was so tired. So there was kind of like a human limit to how much we could quote unquote fix after release. So, I think Blit was just like, they're much more ready to make fixes to the game and kind of like get feedback from the community and be like, okay, people don't seem to like this, like let's just change it. And I think Eric and I were a little more easygoing about that stuff, or at least we wanted to discuss it, like is this really something that like needs to be changed? Like it's really just causing like too many problems, or is it just kind of like a fun, like weird quality with the game kind of thing? But it's difficult, especially with a community getting bigger and bigger, right? Like there are just so many different opinions about all of this stuff. So I always appreciate, I think, getting a chance to talk to you all about this and yeah, get a sense for what people are thinking. Oh, nice. Is Guillermo in the chat?
Yep.
Yeah, Guillermo is awesome. Definitely deserves a lot of love from the community. Put in just a lot of hard work on the game and the development of the game also, but just interacting with the community, like so much of that was Guillermo. Just yeah, like I'm definitely just, I don't know. I get overwhelmed a lot more easily, I think, by like seeing what everybody's saying about the game. And
Yeah.
Guillermo
Understandable.
deserves a lot of credit for going through the forums, going through Discord, going through Reddit, listening to people, talking to people, bringing feedback to our development Slack, and just bringing things to like my attention and everyone's attention so that we can work on stuff.
Yeah, that's really awesome. Yeah, and I'm glad the community was able to have a bigger impact into kind of the direction of Spelunky 2 early on. It was interesting and fun to see that evolution over time. And yeah, Guillermo just called out as well, Eglomar was also a huge part of that community side of things. And they were both really great.
Yep. Yeah, Javi spent a lot of time doing that also. Yeah, Guillermo, hopefully you enjoyed it. I kind of assumed that you were having fun doing that. But it was really well appreciated. You know, like working on an indie game, you have to wear so many different hats, right? And I do feel like Blitworks really complemented me and Eric well as far as our personalities go to make Spelunky 2 happen. There's like a lot going on with Spelunky 2 under the hood. And I think, watching the stream, I'm just like, whoa, like I find myself surprised by how much there is to do in the game.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, after 10 years, like, we're still finding new challenges and new ways to play the game. It's just so fun. So, thanks. I guess I'll just say thanks from the community for what you've given to us, because it's been a great thing and it's been important to so many of us.
Oh yeah, no, really, it's been my pleasure, and I've enjoyed working with Bled and Eric and Andy and everybody so much. And like Spelunky 2 got a lot of QA done like during development.
Not to interrupt you, but Jay the Business Goose just donated $2,500.
Oh my
gosh!
Wow.
Wow!
Thank you so much, Jay. That is just so much.
That's so
amazing.
Awesome.
Yeah, and that pushed us over our new updated goal, well over it. So
that's so great. Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to say basically that like so many people have worked on and supported these games, and I think that includes players in the community for sure. And I think that donation is just, it's a great time to also just say that I'm sad about Twiggle, and that hearing about his passing definitely hit me hard, and I'm glad that we're able to do this charity fundraiser. And he meant a lot to the development team for sure. Guillermo let me know about it. Like I had already heard through Twitter about it, but Guillermo also messaged me on Slack, and we appreciated so much seeing Twiggle's runs and his streams, his records, the Spelunked videos on YouTube. It really meant a lot to us, because when you release a game, it's like you're celebrating, but you're also really nervous and stressed out about how it's gonna go. And so seeing you all play the game, seeing someone like Twiggle is so creative, so funny, play the game and create all this great stuff around it, and bring in other players to try the game, it means a lot, and it goes a long way in, I think, making our fears and worries about the game after release go away. So yeah. Much love to Twiggle and the entire community for sure.
Mm.
Yeah. Well, I think that's probably a good time to call it. I think we could probably talk to you for hours, and I'm sure you have other things to do, and we have some other events to get to. But I just want to say thanks again for hanging out with us most of the day and coming on to chat with us. It's been a great time.
Oh yeah, always my pleasure. Thanks for having me. It's been so much fun. Really, just very proud of this community. It's such a kind and supportive community around a very difficult game, and for sure the community itself influenced Spelunky 2 a lot, and I think you can see a lot of themes surrounding community in the game and its storyline and its design. So thanks so much.
Yeah,
thank you.
Thank you.
All right. We are going to head to a quick intermission, and then Bronx Taco is actually going to broadcast a stream for a little bit to do a all shortcuts plus Olmec Fight Club, which is kind of an event that's already existed for a long time but hasn't been run in a while. So we're going to see the reintroduction of Fight Club, and possibly that will spin off into more Fight Clubs into the future. So we will be with you in a few moments. Thank you.